All right, we're going into legal corner of the podcast this week, talking about the logistics of the NHL and the NBA hub models to return to play end of July, early August. Joining me today, our legal correspondent, Phil Fraietta. Phil, welcome. How are you?
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me back. I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing pretty good, hanging in there despite all the craziness going on in this world. Like I said several times off the air, people, I'm like, sports is the big toy store in the world. I do think there are much bigger, like the stuff we're talking about today is small potatoes, but like it's nice to have it as like a distraction when this real world gets kind of bleak.
Yeah. It's almost hard to even talk about sports given what's going on, but I'm happy that we're going to get an opportunity to do so, and at least for 10 minutes or so, not have to worry about coronavirus and police brutality and all these other issues.
Yeah, I agree. Tonight we're diving into the hub models that the NHL and the NBA have announced to resume their seasons. I figured we'll lump them together because they're very similar concepts, and I think that makes some sense.
Yeah, I think so. And the NFL and the NBA and the NHL, I should say, that they have an advantage here in that they've already played the vast majority of their seasons before they had to shut down. So they got the gate revenue from that. It's not like baseball, which I know I think we're planning on talking about in the next couple of weeks, seeing what happens. But baseball's got this problem of, well, we're not going to get any gate revenue this year, so how do we split the money? At least NBA and NHL, they got most of the gate revenue. They played most of their season. Now it's just about figuring out a way to finish it off.
Yeah, it is. And we'll go to the NHL first because they came out last week. Right now, their model is they're going to split the league into two 12-team conference pods, the East and the West. They're going to two hub cities. We listed out the 10 last week, and a lot has changed since last week. And obviously, they have not picked their hubs yet. So what would you be looking for in a hub to narrow down your list and say, these are my spots I want to go to?
Well, I think a couple of things. First, obviously, you want to look at geographic accessibility. You want to make it as a place where the teams can easily congregate. It's got to be a city that has the space for that, and it's got to be you don't want to make people go too far from home. So I look for that. But two, and probably more importantly, you got to just look at what are the coronavirus stats? Is the virus on a downtrend here? Is it on an uptrend? What's the hospital situation here in case people do start getting sick? And what's the state and local governments doing? Is it a place where it's going to be just impossible to really pull this off, or is it one with a little more lax? So, for instance, like I wouldn't be setting up anything in New York right now.
Yeah, for sure. New York was not on the list, but there are some markets right now that have had some unrest as a result of the protests against police brutality after the George Floyd killing. And do you think that will cause the NHL to have to wait even longer to make their decision? Because I kind of see how the landscape settles down in some of these places that were on their list.
Possibly, sure. I think the NHL, they're not exactly an organization that's really traditionally involved in any sort of political issues like that, unlike the NBA and the NFL to a lesser extent. But I think that they'll definitely need to see what that situation is before they go ahead and reopen and pick a city. So yeah, I think they're going to wait for that, and they have some time. I don't think they have any sort of rush here.
Yeah, because according to the plan right now, that the league has announced the earliest, or we're recording on Friday the 5th. They were announced that on Monday the 8th, when this podcast could come out, that players start reporting to their facilities for group workouts of 5 or 6 people. You do have a lot of NHL players though who are out of market, and right now the league is mandating a 14-day self-quarantine or return to your home city, regardless of how you get there. So, is this a case where if you're an NHL team, you're telling your players who are overseas, get back in the country now so we can get this process started?
Yeah, I think that's what's going on. I think they're going to say, look, let's get back now, let's get the process started. But the fact that they're having the 14-day quarantine and the 5 or 6 people in an arena at a time, it tells you that they're not envisioning anything really getting up and going for another month or so at the earliest, probably even later than that, probably looking at middle or end of July.
Yeah, because right now they say that the training camps, they said, they're going to be early to mid-July is when they start. So you do have time on your side in terms of that.
Yeah, they have time, and so they may as well use that time and make sure that they pick the right hub. Because I think once you pick them, you got to stick with them. It's going to be real hard to pick a hub and then change it. It's a one and done. So make sure you make the right decision.
Yeah, I think I'm curious if they're going to do two in the same country because of the different traveling rules. I wonder if you could put both hubs in Canada or both in the U.S. May make it easier in case you have to play the cup between these two teams and not have to deal with international travel rules.
Yeah. I would think that they're probably going to try and put them in the United States to avoid that, but that's a good point there. And it's a difficult situation with hockey because of all the Canadian teams. I think that's what it's 7 or so.
Yeah.
So it makes it a harder situation, obviously, with the international travel.
Yeah, they also could try and put. I think there's a couple of Canadian cities on the list. They could do 2 Canadian cities if they want to, but I think they may try and do in the U.S. is where the majority of these teams are based, like you said.
Yeah, I think that's what they're going to do. And, it's at the end of the day, I know the NHL has a big Canadian presence, but it is an American operation. So that would be my guess.
Yeah, the NHL also released a sort of an operations manual I took a peek at in terms of like what they want to do to help get phase 2 going, and they release matter. One thing that caught my eye was interesting is that this whole idea of like the group workouts, they're gonna try and keep you in the same group of players like as you're working out. So like, let's say you're the Rangers, let's say they put Artemi Panarin, Chris Kreider, 4 other skaters together in one group. You're only working out with that group when you go on the ice. You're not gonna be mixing with your other teammates yet. The idea is sort of keep these people fresh and limit the circle of who interacts with each other for spread. So I think this is actually a pretty solid idea.
Yeah. That's a very good idea. The less spread, the better. That's what all the public health experts have said. They've recommended even with families, if you're going to start seeing extended family, keep it in the same groups. Don't start commingling. So I think that's a good idea for the time being. Obviously, it's a temporary solution. The teams are going to have to get back together, but for now, I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah, I like it. And the thing I think is going to be key for both these leagues is the NHL has already said they're planning on doing daily testing once the games start. The NBA said the same thing. And this is something we talked about a while back when this thing really first started, about how NBA teams got criticized for hogging tests when there weren't many. The testing situation has improved dramatically. We're still not testing enough. Do you think that either league will come under criticism for taking as many tests as they will require to run their leagues?
If we were talking 2 weeks ago, I probably would have said yes. Now, I don't think so. I think there are issues in the news that people seem to be more concerned with than who's using what tests for the coronavirus. But then again, we'll see. You have an uptick in cases, and people may all of a sudden start caring about the test again. But right now, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I also think by the time you're playing again, you're playing in late July, early August. I figure its capacity will continue to increase, so that should accommodate these situations a little better.
Yeah, you would hope so.
Yeah, and do you prefer, in terms of the model, would you rather see what the NHL is doing and putting these 2 hubs and having the league split up, or do you like what the NBA is doing better, have one campus where everybody's there and not to worry about traveling and all that?
I kind of like what the NBA is doing better. I like putting everybody in just eliminate the travel, get everybody in the same area, and go from there. If it's feasible, I understand it's difficult to find an area that can host that kind of traffic, but I think that's a better way of doing it. Get everybody in the same area. Let's cut down the travel and go from there.
Yeah, I remember we talked on golf a couple weeks ago. You talked about the whole idea of mitigating risk being the biggest thing that these leagues have. The NBA brings 22 teams back for their situation right now. We're switching gears to the NBA here. And this is something I feel like in the risk-reward thing, I feel like it's a little more risky because most of the playoff races were decided at that point. I get the need that the teams want to have these games to sort of warm themselves up for the playoffs, but I feel like having 22 teams there for like an 8-game regular season period, I feel like that's like a little bit much.
Yeah, I think it's probably an unnecessary risk to take, but I think the NBA, you got to have some sort of a warm up procedure before the playoffs. I guess they could have the teams play each other. I don't know if you really need the other teams. Does Team 22 really have a chance of making the playoffs? I don't know, but end of the day, I don't think it's a tremendous risk, but it's certainly a unnecessary one.
Yeah, it's part of me. I was sitting there wondering, like, why are we having Washington and Phoenix show up when they're like basically can be eliminated in 2 games? And this like makes no sense to me.
I don't understand that really. Maybe I don't know if 22 was the right number. Maybe you needed 20. I don't know. I understand that you need a couple more because you do need to play some games. You got to put some sort of a product out there that people want to see, and players need to warm up. But that's didn't seem like the right number to me.
Yeah, and they are going to be playing at the Wide World of Sports Complex down at Disney World, which I get. Like, I like the idea of the NBA sees, oh, it's a campus. We're all going to be here. We're not going to, like, go crazy and all this stuff. But, like, they're going to be the parks itself is reopening in July as of right now. MLS is also coming down there to stage a tournament in July. Would you be concerned that, it's not just the NBA like we originally thought, but now you're going to have some people in the parks. You're going to have the MLS there. You feel like now this dome has got a lot bigger?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how the NBA plans to deal with that. Honestly, I don't think it's realistic to say that we're going to lock the families up in the hotel room and they're not going to leave all day. So I do think the dome got a lot bigger, and I really don't even understand how Disney World's going to open up. But I know that they say they are, so I guess we'll see.
Yeah, indeed. We've heard a couple of things already about how the players be able to golf and they want to be able to go to the restaurants if they outdoor dining if they socially distance, but can't go to the parks. Family members can't go to the parks. So like, it's a question of like, like I get those are attempts to like give them something to do when they're not like playing games and whatnot, but like I feel like it's a very, very thin line you're walking.
Yeah, it's definitely a thin line. I originally envisioned a situation where everybody was going to just go there and play basketball, but that does not seem to be the case now. So I'm a little worried about it and see how it plays out. I'm a little worried about Florida's whole strategy in general, but that's not my decision. The governor and the politicians down there seem to think that it's in better shape than other parts of the country. We'll see if that's right or not.
Yeah, so what is your big concern with the Florida strategy right now? You feel like they're opening too fast?
Yeah, I think the state's opening too fast, and I think that it's flocking going to attract large crowds, frankly. I think people are going to go to Disney World. People are going to go to restaurants down there, and now I'm bringing the NBA in, and I'm bringing soccer players in. A lot of people in a small area. That could be a problem.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting with the strategy is the NBA said they want to cap the number of people in their quote-unquote bubble to 1,600 at a time, so family members can't come in until after the first round of the playoffs, and even then you can bring 3 in at a time. Like, that's something I feel like, I don't know how you're handling that, because, like, once you bring the family in, like, who knows what they've been doing the whole time you're there, and I think that's another risk factor that's going to be very complicated to figure out.
Yeah, almost impossible. That is what makes this dealing with this virus so difficult in general. You just don't know where other people have been.
Yeah, because I'm wondering, like, are you gonna like make the family members quarantine for 14 days and they show up to the bubble? I feel like that's gonna like I don't know who's gonna want to do that and like just go down there and sit in a hotel room for 14 days before they can go out into the world again.
I don't know either. That does not sound like a good situation to me. But you know what? Again, the one thing to keep in mind is that these are professional basketball players, and basketball is a part of their life, a big part of their life. It's their job. So they obviously are willing to make some sacrifices to get on there and play. And, I'm sure there's a lot of players who want that opportunity to get a title, whether it's, LeBron has a great chance to get another one this year. You got some new younger players, like younger teams like the Bucks, Milwaukee. So I'm sure from those guys' standpoint, they're going to do whatever it takes to get out there and have another chance.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. And we're going to talk about baseball next week on the podcast. We're going to basically touch base and figure out, like, try and look at, like, what's going wrong with these talks, because they're the only league that right now that could be in season that really doesn't have a plan to come back, other than tennis, which has its own set of issues because of all the international travel. Baseball, you would think in theory, would be well positioned to come back. But as sort of a teaser for next week, what do you think is the big haul really just the money?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only issue.
Yeah.
The only issue that's out there in baseball is the money. Anybody who tells you otherwise is a liar, and it's about money, and that's all it is. I'm still confident that there's going to be a deal. I know we're going to talk about it, so I won't go too far into it. But it's a bad situation. It's about money, and it really threatens the future of the sport if they don't come up with a deal, which is why I think they're going to. But that's what it is. You've got a union and ownership who do not get along, and they haven't been getting along. You know, they had the whole owners are given a WWE title belt to the cheapest owner, all that. So there's a bad relationship there, and this was the icing on the cake. But I'll save the rest of it for next week, and hopefully we know more by next week too.
Yeah, we're basically recording like on Fridays right now to see like what happens, and we've hit 2 for 2 with the golf and the NBA. I feel like we will have an answer next week, one way or the other. That's my gut.
Well, if they intend to play by July 4 weekend, they're going to need to come up with an answer. Probably by the beginning of this week, or next week, I should say. If not, by the time we record next week, at the very latest.
Yeah, the question I've always said is, like, if you're MLB, like, and you have your draft being televised on ESPN next week, do you really want, like, your event being overshadowed by people asking questions about whether or not you're actually going to play baseball this year?
No, I don't think so. I think that over this coming weekend, like you said, today's Friday. So I think over this coming weekend, you're going to have a clearer picture on if there's a deal or if there's not a deal.
Indeed. We'll talk about that next week. Phil, thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. I'm excited to come on and talk baseball next week. You and I have been talking about it a lot, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we would take the off-air conversations on air next week, that's for sure. Up next, our pop culture portion of the program. We're going to talk a little Space Jam with our pop culture correspondent, Sam DeRosa, right after this.